Yeah, I was just saying to you that for the last probably 6 months, without even realizing it from a distance, you've been an incredible help to my own training. I don't know where I was at last time we spoke. We said was 2022. So it's 2 years ago. So 2023, I got back into some more serious training, or I attempted to. And my audience is going to be so sick of hearing it because they know. But to cut a long story short, I had consistent troubles with calf injuries. I was constantly straining calves. I was going back out and maybe just training like I needed to build up to. I got into it too quickly. I went to a physio and he said, hey, look, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to be really deliberate with your return in terms of starting with a lot less running and working up to it until you get to a point where your body's ready to take that next step. That was a little trial and error. He goes, the second thing you're going to want to do is get a really consistent strength training routine, which is designed specifically for running. And I thought, okay, well, I've got Angelo Gingerelli's book on the shelf at home. I hadn't had any need to use it until that point because I hadn't been training for anything specifically. Bro, the last 6 months, I was telling you just before, comedy's been consistent, running's been consistent. The other thing which has been really consistent is following to a T your running training program. I've been in there, twice a week minimum. I'm doing a Pilates session on top of that. It has been such a nice welcome back to the world of strength training with a little bit of focus. I think the one thing I really missed and one thing that people are confused about is how do I structure a running training strength program? And man, that's clear that with the book, it's something that you guys put a whole lot of work into because you've got every season, every part of the year covered.
Yeah, first of all, man, I love to connect with you over the internet. I think it's amazing things. I think we've joked around before, but there's probably maybe two guys on the planet that love running and comedy as much as me and you, and we've somehow been connected on the other sides of the world from each other. I think that's amazing. And then hearing how much you like the book and how much it helped you through those injuries and kind of take you on the next level, I love that, man, because that's why we wrote it and want to help as many people as we can. And I think one thing that's interesting is you have an extensive background in running and coaching in the running world, right? And even someone like yourself who's super knowledgeable, run a ton of races, a high-level, top-tier runner, that resistance training component was even absent from your training, right? So my idea when we started, it's going on 6 years ago now, we started the idea for the book, is that these worlds belong in the same conversation, right? The weight room is important, the track of the road is important, and they really got to work together better. And even, a guy like you didn't have access to that before the book came out. So that's pretty powerful that we kind of bridge that gap and merge the two worlds. And I think that's it, man. The more people we can get on board that running is great, mileage is great, speed work is great, but how do we get that last piece of the puzzle together? And I think, and the reason why the book worked, in my opinion, why we got a lot of positive feedback on it since 2021, is that it came from the position of people that have run marathons and triathlons and have we walked the walk or run the run, if you will, right? In America, at least, which might be different than Europe and Australia, we have this thing. We got like strength coaches over here. We got running endurance people over here, and they're never having a conversation. And I want to be one of the first people to not only have the conversation, but tell my side of that story. And I think we got the message out, man. I think we got a lot of people stepping that training up a little more and showing them how to do it. And, realizing that, squatting your max squat day the day before a marathon is silly unnecessary, right? But never challenge yourself in the weight room and never picking up heavier dumbbells is also the wrong way to go about it. So we got to find the right way to do it. And I think we provided people with a good foundation of how to get that ball rolling.
For sure. I think puzzle is the word you used, and puzzle is such a perfect word for it. You nailed it. I was very confident and still developing confidence in a lot of new areas of running and training, especially around heart rate and using data for performance. But since I finished competitive running for the first time in 2014, my old training program involved zero strength training, which is wild to say. I don't know whether it's become far more of a trending part of training since then, or if I was just completely oblivious to it. Maybe a combination of both. But what was so helpful was, when I left, I went out and I started to get into a really generic training program just for strength. I always said to my wife, I go, babe, when I finish running, I'll stop being skinny. I'll go in the gym. I'll get some size. And I was probably eating terribly, but I was going to the gym 5 times a week and I was doing the classic. I'd go in and I'd do chest and tries. I'd do back and buys. I'd do legs. And I might do 2 of those sessions twice. And so I was in the gym 5 times a week. And that was the only knowledge I had. And each time I went into the gym for like a chest and try session, it was always the same session. There wasn't any variety. And it was very boring. It was lucky I was disciplined because I knew what my goal was. And I knew, okay, if I want to have a particular look, I wasn't worried about functionality. I just had to go in, had to eat, had to hit these muscles. But, dude, I was doing that for probably 6 years and even 8 years. And even when I got back into running competitively at the start of last year, or at least training like I wanted to run competitively at the start of last year, I knew strength was important. And we'd had conversations in that point. But because I'd never really been forced to have to put, pen to paper, I hadn't really thought about it that much. So I started to get back into the old strength training routine. And then once I got hit up by my PT and he goes, dude, what are you doing? Like, go and get a really structured program. Part of the thing I loved so much, so I took it up so I was doing the running section. For everyone listening, there's running, there's swimming, there's cycling, and a triathlete section at the end of the book. I picked it up the running session at the build up and base phase, I think is what you guys have labeled it. And there's 3 or 4 different styles of workouts. And the thing I liked most initially, man, I was welcome to so many new exercises, such a different variety of exercises when I was training, and just the enthusiasm that I felt about getting into the gym, knowing that, all right, you're going to be doing the base and build up, but you're going to have an option as to which one of these 3 or 4 different training sessions you can use. It just made me so much more enthusiastic for the whole process of actually being in the gym a couple times a week.
Yeah, I think one thing where people in the endurance world kind of drop the ball on is they kind of do what you did, which is I'm going to do the same chest and tries workout every Monday for years at a time, right? But you wouldn't do that you wouldn't just run around the exact same course at the exact same pace day after day after day, right? You'd pick a different route, you'd pick a different terrain, you'd pick a different pace, you'd run hills one day, speed one day, whatever it might be. And I think, the weight room probably didn't need to be that varied. But the idea that there's a couple things we need to do, right? Just about everybody can benefit from some kind of squat, some kind of hinge, some kind of push, some kind of pull. But there's a dozen different ways to do each of those. And the idea in our sport particularly is we're looking at training for the long haul, right? We're our fastest at 22 or 23, but we're still competitive at 42 or 43, right? So the idea is that we're going to look at training for a 20, 30-year block. How do we make that happen and stay mentally engaged in what we're doing and making sure we're getting better every time? I think you have an element of variety in there, right? Different kind of exercises, keep yourself mentally stimulated and to stimulate your body differently, right? And then the idea of just progression. We got to keep getting stronger. One thing I see with a lot of endurance people, and I was never one of them because I come from the strength world first, then the endurance world. But there's always you doing the same weight day after day after day. If there's no progression, we're not going to make progress. It's that simple. If you always run a 10-minute mile, you're always going to be a 10-minute mile person. Eventually, you got to run a 9:30 mile to make yourself a 9:30 mile person. Same thing in the gym. If you always pick up 10-pound dumbbells, you can't be shot. You can't pick up 15s. So you got to find a way to make that progression work and put the right kind of resistance on your body and force it to get stronger and more injury resistant that way. The other thing I think real quick is you said 2014 is not that long ago. It's 10 years ago. It's not in the span of human history, not that long. But I think from the strength and conditioning side of things, I think if you look at like where strength and conditioning fits into sports in the, say, pre-1990s, it hit your football, your rugby, your American football, your wrestling, where guys all of a sudden started looking bigger and stronger. In the 90s, we figured out that if you get a baseball or softball player bigger and stronger, they're going to hit the ball further, hit more home runs. And then the steroid era started, wasn't a great thing, but that hit those sports. 2000s, you see basketball players start looking like LeBron James, right? You see guys and girls looking like superheroes basically on the basketball teams. And then I think this decade, it's endurance stuff. That it just hasn't been a part of it. And like you said, in the last 10 years, the idea that you need to train, need to lift, and there's a bunch of different ways to do it and be effective on the marathon course, the bike course, whatever it might be. It's kind of a newer idea that I think guys like me and you are getting a benefit from, that we're able to train during and experience some of these changes.
Yeah. So from a lifestyle perspective, even outside of running, I mean, obviously from a running performance perspective, I get it. I can see the value. I can feel the value. I love being in there. From a lifestyle longevity perspective, what I like about it is for so long, my philosophy or my approach to running was go out and just run, sure, do some stretching, maybe a little bit of body weight work. but we're starting to learn, or as we're learning more and more about just the benefits that resistance training has on, like, not only muscle health, but bone health and longevity, aging well, that's something that I really value as well. And it is interesting in the running world how many people I still speak to who they have some form of some kind of strength and conditioning workout, and you can kind of see it. I mean, you don't have to look too far at the start of a marathon race line or a half marathon race to see that real skinny, scrawny looking athlete. No offense to any of you who are listening who would put yourself in that category, because obviously that's what Angelo is here to talk about, the ability to change that. But I mean, I always found that really unattractive, not just as like an aesthetic point of view, but from a personal perspective, to be very good at running but incredibly weak, not able to have any muscle or upper body strength. And so obviously that longevity or lifestyle factor is something that's getting ticked off a lot throughout the programs as well. Because you would think with a strength training program for runners, 90% of it would be legs, or at least that's sort of what I thought. But then when you actually break it down, you're going to know, of course, you want to hit your core. You're going to be hitting legs, sure, you're hitting the glutes, but you're hitting the core, you're hitting back, you're hitting shoulders. And one thing that I'm always interested to talk about or find out more about is this upper body strength for distance runners or endurance athletes. Can you talk a little bit about like what some of the benefits of having some form of upper body strength is to an endurance athlete? Because I think so often it's overlooked or just seen as not really relevant to what we're trying to achieve.
Right. Yeah, I think there's twofold. One, a lot of endurance is, I don't need to do upper body because I'm a runner, right? In my opinion, you're a human being that has a life and have activities of daily living, and you want to be able to pick your kids up and carry your groceries and be strong into adulthood or old age. And running is a big part of your life, which is awesome, but some other parts of life where upper body strength are going to matter, right? But then if we kind of niche that down to just running, look at posture, look at gait. Look at how the joke I always make is that if you go to the starting line of a marathon, everybody looks like a rock star. Everybody looks great when they're starting off, right? They're ready, they're fresh, they're excited. Go to the finish line and take pictures of those people there. 90% of people look terrible because they don't have the muscular endurance or muscular strength to have good posture, good gait, good running mechanics through, in some cases, even a 5K, but definitely in that 26.2 distance, it looks bad for just about everybody. So if you look at running economy and getting from point A to B the most efficient way possible, well, that's to refine your running technique and your mechanics and hold them to a high standard for as long as you possibly can, right? I think the key to doing that is to be strong enough to do that over, say, 2 to 5 hours, whatever it takes you to run a marathon. And the other thing I think you see too with the very slender, I don't lift kind of man or woman, can they do that for a long time, right? Maybe they're crushing races when they're 21, 22. What's their life like at 40 or 50, right? I think a lot of times you look at a sport like running where you're burning so many calories a day, right? A lot, and to the point where it's hard to take in enough calories and maintain muscle mass. Combine that with a lack of resistance training and a lack of muscular strength, and now you got a recipe for some really bad things to happen earlier in life than they might if you had that resistance training background and your kind of base levels a little bit higher when you're in the prime of your life between 25 and 35, something like that.
Yeah. You touched on this briefly with what you said before, but one thing that I was keen to discuss with you is just finding phases to fit in like heavier levels of resistance into the work. So for everyone listening, the book is essentially structured in 3 phases, isn't it? You've got your base and your build up, you've got your taper, and then you have your off season. Do you want to take that as a little bit of a talking point and just discuss the benefits of why it is you've structured it that particular way?
Sure, and that's something that I ran my first marathon in 2011, right? But I've been a strength coach since about 2000, about 10 years in the game, pre-endurance training, and now 13 or so post. And that's a section of the book I just couldn't have written before running marathons. I just didn't understand that world nearly enough. Then, after a couple of years and a couple of marathons, I figured out the best way to – if you're a competitive athlete, like you're running at a high school, a college, a pro team, you know when your off-season is, you know when your important races are. But if you're more of a recreational athlete like myself, I kind of break my year down into 4 phases, right? First is off-season, the first couple of months after my last big race. I live near the beach, and our winter is the opposite of yours. But where I live in the winter, so for us, it's like November, December, January, and February. There's really not that many events. It's too cold. Nobody wants to be outside. So that's kind of the way I look at my off-season. You guys, it's probably May, June, July, August, something like that. So I say if you're no, we're all runners. We're going to be running in the cold, the sleet, the snow, whatever it is by nature. I do it too. But that's when I try to do new things. I mean, I'm running less miles. I'm trying new exercises. I'm trying new angles of pull or push. I'm trying new kinds of squats. And I want to come out of that phase as strong as I possibly can. Because my theory is if I go a little heavier on my squats and RDLs on a Monday and I'm sore on Tuesday or Wednesday, it doesn't really matter. Those runs are important. Every run's important. But this is when I want to be sore, be banged up, feel like I'm getting stronger, right? Coming to that, now we'll start building our base for our racing season, right? So where I live in the States, that might be our like March through July, something like that, right? And now we're building more miles every week. Our speed workouts are getting harder. Our tempo runs are getting faster. And now our running becomes more important, but we're still trying to build some strength at the same time, right? So maybe we're dropping it down from 3 days a week to 2. We're being a little more conservative. We're picking our weights and our resistance and our med balls and kettlebell stuff like that, because now the runs become more important, right? Then let's say in the States, probably the biggest race for most recreational runners comes in the fall. Maybe New York City Marathon's in the fall, the Philadelphia Marathon's in the fall. So now you're getting like that September, October time. We'll call that peak mileage. And this is when our long runs might be, 20 plus miles. It might be, 50 to 100 mile weeks, depending on what level you are. And I think, again, we're going to try to get in the gym twice, but now we're going to be smart about it. We're going to pick easier exercises, not as demanding. We try to maintain what we did during the off season and the building and base phase and really focus in on being a runner and being a fast runner. And then you got your taper period, which will be your last couple of weeks before your big event. And what I like to say is just keep it simple. If you decrease your mileage by 20%, decrease your resistance training by 20%. So if your long run was 20 miles and then you drop it down to 16, which is 20% of that, decrease if you're going to do a set of 10 squats, do sets 8. You're going to, bench press 100 pounds, bench press 80 pounds, drop it down by 80%, you let your body recover and show up rested and ready to go for those big races, and then take a couple weeks off, celebrate hopefully, and then start the cycle again for the next year with your off season. And then is getting stronger every year, right? If we're pressing a reset button every time we run a marathon or every time we have a race season, we're really not getting better year after year, right? And I think one thing with the American sports system, we look at things short term a lot, right? So high school is 4 years, college is 4 years. If you're looking to play something professionally, that's 10 years max, and usually it's going to be a lot less than that. But the endurance events is so cool to me because it can be a 40-year career. You know what I mean? You could do your first marathon at 20 and your last marathon at 70 and still have a decent time, maybe even older than that. So I think it's a really cool idea. But I think that's a great thing. But it becomes an even better thing when you look at training as being not just months or years, but decades, and how we get better from decade to decade.
Yeah. So the idea, I love what you said about the off season. Naturally, the intensity of some of the running work is going to be reduced just based on the nature of the time of the year that it's at. And so we know that the idea of doing a really intense resistance training session before a really intense track or whatever it is, interval session is not going to be a great idea. Obviously, the stress that you place on your body is a little too much if it's too close. And so while that intensity on the track is reduced, that's why we're focused so much on really improving the overall strength, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, and I think it's the best time of year to do it. And what I found, it's probably happened because I got involved in endurance sports a little bit later in life. It was in my early 30s before I ran a marathon, and now in my 40s, I found my body reacts better to kind of in-season, off-season, right? I could get a 50-mile week here or there when I'm really killing the running and a good way killing it and feeling great. But then there's certain times of the year I need a little bit of recovery time and need to focus on some other things. I think that's one thing, man. I'm a runner. You're a runner. I love talking to runners. I do think there's kind of this mentality of more miles is always better. And I'll never, ever take my foot off the gas. And I think what I would say, if you're a 19-year-old genetic specimen that won genetic lottery and you have no other things in your life besides running, that's a great mentality. You should get after it every single day. If you're an adult and you didn't win the genetic lottery, you're a regular person like me, and you have a job and a family and other responsibilities, maybe start thinking about, I'm going to focus on these 1, 2, or 3 big races for the year, these kind of secondary races, and block off some part of that year for getting my body feeling good, looking good, and being big and strong to be able to go as hard as possible at those races and events at different times of the year.
Yeah, man, I echo what you just said. I mean, I'd put myself in that same category of no genetic freak. I've got a couple of kids, I've got a wife, I got hobbies and passions outside of running, and so all day, every day, to commit myself to what is now just an enjoyable sport that I love to do is not realistic. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so
yeah, I do. I mean, I'm gonna share. I was recently thinking about some recovery stuff. That's a big thing in the States right now. All the recovery tactics and cryotherapy and everything we're hearing about, reading about, researching, and I think it's great. And I ran one marathon pre having a child, and I've run a bunch since she was born. But weirdly enough, my second marathon I ever ran was the fastest time I ever ran, and the best I ever felt afterwards and during my training. And my daughter was 1 year old at that point. And I went back in my head, and the only thing I really changed was every Saturday I would do my long run super early in the morning, right? So started like 10 miles and kind of built up to 20 plus, whatever it might have been. And then as soon as I got back, my wife's a yoga instructor, so she would be leaving the house to go teach a yoga class. I would take my daughter immediately, still have my running clothes on, still sweaty, in the stroller and walk just for miles and let her take a nap. And I think what happened was that walking after every long run for a couple miles, which seems counterintuitive, just kind of got my body moving and got all the bad stuff flowing out, the toxic stuff, the good stuff. I'd be drinking water the whole time. And then it was just a really cool thing. And then I realized, okay, well, yeah, cryo cuffs are great and hot tubs are also great. But there's also just moving after a run made me feel a whole lot better. And I realized that's become part of my training since then. So you get kind of like two guys with kids. It's kind of an interesting thing. I didn't realize I was doing it. And the next day I was like, I ran 18 miles. Just I feel okay today because I ran 18, but then I walked 3 with a stroller right after. And it kind of just flushed everything out and made me feel better the next day, which I think was a kind of a cool thing I found by mistake between being a runner and a dad at the same time.
yeah, that's really cool. You sort of just sparked a thought of, I had a guy called Gordo Byrne on the podcast recently, who's a really interesting guy to listen to around all things endurance. And I mean, it's in the same world as what you just mentioned, but he spoke about for a lot of athletes who are relatively new to the sport and they're trying to build up their aerobic capacity. One thing that you can do if you can't go out and run 18 miles is go out and run a few miles and then do something which is non-weight bearing. So maybe come back, and if you don't have kids or you just want to chill a little bit, jump on a stationary bike and just roll the legs over on a relatively light intensity. And I know maybe that's a little more intense than what you just spoke about, but that time on feet or that time that you're just throwing at your cardiovascular system to develop, sounds like you were ticking a number of other boxes, like with the actual flushing out of all the crap that had built up, but also the hydration. But I mean, it makes sense to me when you say that, because obviously one thing that so many marathon runners and coaches speak about is it's not only your running, but it's your ability to manage that time on your feet, especially if you're running like a 3.5 to 4.5 hour marathon. That's a lot of time just being out there standing up for so many of us. So you can see how that's beneficial. You actually.
Touch, can I cut you off for a second? Have you ever volunteered a marathon, like giving out water or doing any kind of volunteer work at a marathon?
I haven't.
Okay, it's a weird thing because I've done it a couple of times. Just races I didn't want to run, just wanted to help out. I love being part of the community. That's exhausting. Like just standing there handing out water cups can be exhausting. We're giving out T-shirts during a race, and then you sit and think to yourself, like, how hard is running a marathon again? Like it's a weird thing, just being mentally engaged and being on your feet for say 5 or 6 hours if you're working a race. It's hard, man. And then you realize, I'm going to run one next year, and you do that too. But yeah, I think it's a harder physiological thing than a lot of people realize sometimes.
For sure. I haven't done that, but I did used to work at an Italian restaurant, which was open 24/7. And I remember sometimes I would start my shift at 2:00 in the afternoon, and I wouldn't finish till 1. And initially, that's 1 in the morning. Initially, I would get home and I would wake up the next morning, and I was like, oh my gosh, like that time on feet just wandering around a restaurant was intense. And it is amazing how such a seemingly subtle thing can cause so much discomfort. But over time, to emphasize both of our points, naturally your ability to handle that load gets a lot easier or a lot better. You touched on something with that answer that I love as well, because I think the world of I'm not sure if there's any subject in the world that's excluded from what I'm about to say, but distance runners, particularly myself, when it comes to strength work, I have this, I don't know what it is, I have this tendency to lean towards complexity. I don't know why. I always feel like I go in there, not so much anymore since I've got myself a structure, but before I picked up Finish Strong, I was going in there and constantly double guessing myself. I should be doing this. I should be doing more reps. I should be doing less reps. I should be doing this exercise. And you spend the whole time just second guessing yourself, which I don't like. What I love about the majority of the people that we're speaking to now probably consider themselves in the same phase of life as us. They're not necessarily professional runners, though they might be aiming to that. But they've got a whole lot of time, but not a whole lot of knowledge. This idea of doing the simple things consistently seems to be a theme. I mean, a lot of the exercises that I look at in Finish Strong, they're not radical in the sense that no one's going to know them, but they're structured in a way over the course of phases throughout the year that if you can be consistent, you're going to see results.
Yeah, man, that's exactly it. The cliche we use in the States is an inch wide and a mile deep, right?
Yeah.
Pick a couple things and just do them to death till the wheels fall off. And I think there's something to that, right? Particularly if you're a little intimidated by the weight room or the gym. I think we talked earlier about how important variety is. And I think there's an important and a place to it, definitely. But I think if you're intimidated or really it's your first month training, getting really good at the basics is the foundation of whatever you're going to do next, right? So let's, for example, we're going to train our upper body. We could bench press, we could do dumbbell bench press, we could do a machine bench press, we could do a bench press on an incline, decline, physio ball. There's a dozen plus ways to train our pecs, right, our chest muscles. If you can't do a push-up, none of that's really going to help you out, right? You got to have the foundation built first. And I think that there's one thing is a lot of endurance runners and other endurance athletes come to the weight room with such little experience, they're going to benefit at least the first year from just building that base and getting good at the basics. And then once you master the basics, you go to step 2, step 3, whatever it is. And the thing I've been talking about a lot of conferences is this. We have a weird thing. Like in the resistance training world, we've known what works for centuries. You can make an argument since the ancient Greeks, we've figured out that if you carry a goat every day and the goat keeps getting heavier, you keep getting stronger. It's kind of the basis of resistance training, really, right? But the problem is it's an industry and a business, and it's really hard to sell people consistency, progression, discipline. It's kind of easier to sell this new technology, this new thing you need to do, this new way to structure things. And I'm the last person ever to knock someone's ability to make a living. But I also think to some extent, all that stuff is great once you build a foundation, but the foundation can be built very simply.
That's such a good point. Yeah. I often forget about the business side of things where you're trying to market yourself as having the secret ingredient. And as a result, you start putting some fancy little coating on what is just ancient technology or ancient information. Really fascinating. One of the things that a lot of people ask me about when it comes to the strength training is there an ideal amount of days I should be in there? Obviously, as a part of your program, you get a bit of a generic idea as to what is good for the average person. Where do you recommend a person who you just referred to, someone who doesn't necessarily have any solid strength built up in the capacity to do a push-up, start? Do they go and just start with bodyweight exercises and gradually build up from that? How does that progression take place?
Yeah, I think if you start in your off season, right, so after your big runs are out of the way for the year, 3 days a week is a good sweet spot to be in, right? That's kind of what the book breaks down. Some push-pull stuff every day, some leg stuff every day, and just kind of get your body used to dealing with that kind of tension and that kind of fatigue it's going to have, which if you never lifted before is going to be a new feeling, right? The first time you've ever guys like us have been doing this for a long time. It's hard to even remember, but go talk to somebody the day after the first day they ever lifted weights, right? And they feel like they got hit by a truck, which is right. Then the second day is a little bit worse because it's late onset muscle soreness, and then the third day they start to feel good again, right? So I think experiment with that, and then when we did it, and I hate to keep bringing up the book, I'm not trying to be a salesman about it, but one thing I think we did pretty good, we identified 6 core exercises and gave progressions and regressions from those. So I would say go to the first regression. So it's a push-up for your upper body push. It's a pull-up for your upper body pull. It's a body weight squat. They're very simple exercises. Get good at those and then start working your way through the book from there. With the goal being eventually for everybody to get to kind of the end of the progressions and it may at some point need another more advanced program, but really just start at the bottom where the foundation and kind of build from there. And the other thing is too, and don't be intimidated to go to the gym and not know what you're doing. Most people in most gyms don't feel like they know what they're doing, right? Sure. So just go in and try some stuff, and I would say this to be smart about it. don't look at a guy or girl that's jacked and be like, oh, I need to try that. That might be a thing that's going to crush you if you try it. You know what I mean? So have a plan, stick to it, and be cool with the bottom, because in reality, most people need to master those things before they move to the top anyway.
Yeah, man, it's so funny you say that. So there's a guy at my gym here in Point Lonsdale in Victoria, and this guy, he's got a good physique. I noticed him from a distance for a long time. I'd always say g'day to him, but the conversation would stop there. He had his headphones in, so did I. But I would always look at him and I'd go, man, like this guy is naturally gifted. He clearly knows what he's doing. One day he came over to me, tapped me on the shoulder. He goes, hey, mate, hey, what's up? He goes, do you reckon you could just come and have a look at my technique? He was doing some dips. And I laughed and I was like, oh, dude, I've looked at you as a bit of a god. Like I've been intimidated doing exercises in front of you, and you've come up to me with this glorious physique and asked me to critique your own exercise. So, man, I know exactly what you say. And I remember the awkwardness of going to the gym.
You know what I will say? I'll say to that point too, though. The people that I find that are really good at anything, like that guy in the gym and building his body, right? Or a guy like yourself with running. Normally people that are, you're open to new ideas and open to coaching and open to try new things, right? I find the people that think they know everything and don't seek new ideas or don't ask for help or assistance, they really get stuck and you're not able to take that next step, right? So I think, you gotta feel confident in your knowledge and know I know how to do X, Y, and Z. But if I'm also open to read a book or go watch a podcast or go try ABC or ask somebody for advice on ABC. Because I think in reality, especially in sport like running, where even if you felt like your training was perfect, your nutrition was perfect, and you had a PR at a distance, you can't prove doing something different wouldn't even give you an even better PR, right? So it's like there's no Super Bowl. You could always have gotten better because the clock it's the best and worst thing, right? You could always be faster, no matter how fast you ran. So it's like there's so many question marks. I just kind of look at it as I know some things that work for me and a lot of the people I train, but I'm always looking for the next thing I could pull in and then make sense and another idea or a way we could build on what we're already doing.
Yeah, it's funny. I often think I would love to get a collated, a whole heap of videos just laid up next to each other of athletes who have just run a PB and said, and the best thing is I think I can go faster. I remember when Alan Webb ran his the American mile record. I think it was 3:46 at the time. He came over and he had an interview, and they go, "How did it feel?" He goes, "I think I can go faster." And naturally, he didn't. But you're right. There's no athlete that ever gets to the end of what it is that they're doing. I'm like, okay, that's my capacity. There's no more in the tank. I'll never improve on that.
Nobody knows that until it's over. You know what I mean? Because I think chemically or hormonally, something happens when you do well at an event. You want to do it again and believe you can perform at that level or better again immediately, right? And then just for everybody, even the fastest men and women alive, eventually Father Time takes over and you don't get faster anymore, right?
Yeah.
And that's at a world-class level. But I do think for regular people like me, just the idea of me getting better or running similar times as I did 10 years ago or being good in my age group is still a pretty motivating factor for me, which I think it should be for most people.
Yeah, I've been really surprised at how enthusiastic, even though I'm way off the times that I used to run, I can't believe how much joy I still get from finishing I ran 34 minutes for 10K the other day, which is about, four or so minutes off my best time. And I finished that race and I was like, I didn't think I was at that kind of level just yet. And so, yeah, it is still really exciting. Man, there's one thing that you mentioned, or one thing that I mentioned is the confusion about the exercises. And I guess that goes hand in hand with maybe the intimidation about going into the gym. But boredom in the actual strength training area is something that I hear about constantly. In fact, my wife doesn't go to the gym. She's just joined a CrossFit class. So instead of paying $10.50 a week, she pays $55 a week to have a bloke and a girl they're actually really good coaches. And I love the people. They're very good at what they do. But I'm like, I wish you could just figure out how to get the motivation up, because I'm paying $42 a month to go to the gym. You're paying $220. But for where was I going with this? So those two factors, the confusion around how to do the exercises, the intimidation around where to start, or other people's opinions of you can really hold someone back. If you have never touched a weight before, I know we've talked about the progression. You recommend going to see a personal trainer or a professional to actually get a bit of an eye on the exercises, or you think just you can get a bit of a gauge just through reading about it and feeling your way through?
Okay, I think that's kind of a tough question, right? Because I think it depends who the person is. If you, it's hard to say. If say you're 18 and never lifted weights before, but your central nervous system is still pretty pliable, you pick things up quickly, you might be able to watch some YouTube videos, read a couple books, and get a pretty good handle on it, right? If you're 38 instead of 18 and have never been in the weight room before, and your body doesn't move the way it used to, and you don't pick things up quickly, then you should probably definitely have a coach or a trainer look at what you're doing, right? I think it's a little bit of a not a loaded but a hard question to answer. I think it's more based on the person, right?
Sure.
And I think we're moving into an era where ideally, maybe in the Australia, United States, kids are getting exposed to this younger, which is a better thing as far as them getting a little bit better kinesthetic awareness and understand the importance of being physically active and learn how to do some things at a younger age, right? I think if you're in that case, if you went to a good phys ed program and you played different sports when you're young and you learn things easily, then maybe the book YouTube option kind of works. If that's not you, maybe you got to pay someone to take a look at what you're doing and make some tweaks and tell you if you're doing it right or wrong kind of thing. But I think it's kind of individualized.
That's a good point. Yeah,
I'll say one thing too. I think your body is a good guide to that too, right? Like if you look at someone doing a lunge, say, and you try to do it, and it puts you in drastic knee pain, you're doing that wrong. That should not happen. Don't force yourself through that, right? On the same token, if you didn't exercise the same way for a year, and so absolutely no progress whatsoever in the weight you're using, the way you look, you probably need to have someone take a look at that or pick a different exercise, but you're doing something wrong in that case. But your body's usually a pretty good guide if you're doing stuff right or wrong.
Yeah, it's a really good point. In terms of any parents out there, this is something that I'm thinking about a lot with my boys at the moment. As I said, 3.5, 1.5. Charlie our big sport over here is AFL, Australian football, and he is, as I mentioned, 3.5. We're about to get him involved in his first it's called Oz Kick. It's like you're welcome to the world of AFL. But on top of that, that's really cool. I like that socially. Like he's running around with a lot of kids. He's practicing his hand-eye coordination, having a little bit of fun. I heard someone recently speak about the best form of strength for a young kid like that is to get them involved in gymnastics, and that body coordination, hand-eye coordination, ability just to know your body is what he spoke about as being probably the best form of strength you can get him involved in. So I'm looking at finding a fun little program for him in that area so he can improve. Would you recommend any foundations for a kid that age? And while you talk, let me just shut this curtain, because for anyone on YouTube, you'll see this sun starting to come in real strong. There we go. Gotcha.
No, what I would say is that as a young 3.5, 4-year-old, I think gymnastics is a great way to go as far as learning kinesthetic awareness, how to use your body, activate your central nervous system, and move well. I think gymnastics is a great place to start. I think track and field at a young age with a good coach, you're going to teach good running mechanics, is a great place to start. And my argument is, even if your son or daughter is not going to be a runner, do we run in every other sport in some capacity? So show me a sport where better running mechanics doesn't help, and I'll take this statement back, but I think it helps just about everything, right? I think wrestling is a good one as far as strength, overcoming an external force in your opponent, right? And the competitive nature it takes to do that, and that's a great sport to get involved with young. And then I think the one I say, I think swimming is important for two reasons. Number one, the safety aspect of right, knowing how to swim if you're in the water is safe. But secondarily, we've seen in the triathlon world, the best overall triathletes are usually high school and college swimmers, because that's the hardest thing to learn as you get older. And we see in the endurance world, we love running. I'm a runner by nature, so are you. But it's for everybody, it's hard on your joints. It beats you up. It's not right for everybody. Swimming is a great lifelong cardiovascular activity, which is pretty much no impact on the joints and the musculoskeletal system. So I think that's another one. Not too many people are like, oh man, I'm mad, I'm such a good swimmer. But a lot of people, myself included, look back and think, I wish I got to be a better swimmer when I was younger so I could work out like that a little bit better now. So I would say gymnastics, track, wrestling, and swimming are probably the best place to start, and then get into like your ball sports, your tennis, your golf, your baseball, whatever it might be from there.
Yeah. Man, did I ever introduce you to Brenton Ford?
I don't believe so. Who's that?
I don't think so. No, I don't. I was just thinking as you were speaking, I don't think I have. I should do it, man. He's a good friend of mine. He is he's a swimming technique coach.
Okay.
And his business is, it's mind blowing. In fact, he was a big inspiration for me to start Relax Running. In fact, Relax Running was a joke that I sent to him because I bought the domain name. His business is called Effortless Swimming. And I feel like
I know of him. And the person that wrote the book with Dr. Richard Borgers,
yes,
he's been on his podcast.
Interesting, because I was going to say I should. So Brenton lives 40 minutes from me, half an hour from me. He's a good friend of mine, and he's just doing awesome things in the world of swimming. Really good guy. I should hook you up with him because he's got a monster audience as well, who I know would really love the message that you guys are sharing. So if you want that connection, I mean, it sounds like you've already got an in, but I know he'd be really open to having a chat with you.
Definitely, man. Let's make that happen because he's doing, like you said, just great stuff in the swimming world.
Yeah, the reason I brought him up, though, was because it's so interesting to look and to talk to him about the interest in swimming technique, which is funny because for whatever reason, one of my frustrations in the world of running is the lack of interest in the mechanics of running. I would say that 90% of runners are either neutral or probably think there's no need for an improved improved technique when it comes to running performance. And so whenever I'm working with an athlete that I actually coach, it's something that I use an online app just to go over and see if there's any points of tension or inefficiency, or even look at how technique changes from a jog to a fast run to a fatigue state. It's mind-blowing, man. I get frustrated all the time about the fact that so few athletes are interested in improving that part of performance.
The one thing about the running community that's confused me for the last 10 or 15 years is if you look at people who voluntarily run this many miles and compete in races and travel to compete, you're looking at people who are incredibly driven, right? In most cases, very intelligent, and in most cases, successful at other parts of their life, right? They make enough money to travel and buy new running shoes and hire coaches and have gym memberships, and they have families and jobs in order to make them successful, right? I've never met a group of people less interested in their running technique, their warm-ups and cool-downs, right? Or up to pretty recently, the resistance training side of how to make the machine you're working with bigger, stronger, faster. I think that last one's changed a little bit in the last decade. But I think the warm-up and cool-down thing is interesting. And the idea of, like, you're successful in so many other parts of your life, but you keep dealing with the same injuries in running, why would you not want to address that? Like, figure out what you're doing wrong, whether it's flexibility, mobility, mechanics, whatever it is, and try to get better at that. But it's a weird thing. I mean, we're a part of it. It's part of our community I don't really understand that well.
For sure. Yeah, I think one thing that works in the favor of swimmers is you can sit down with Brenton and he'll say, hey, adjust this, and you'll swim 4 seconds faster almost immediately over 100 meters. And from a performance perspective, I get that, because if someone's going to say, hey, make these changes and it's going to improve the way you feel when you run or the speed that you run over time, it's a bit more of a tough sell. But I mean, like, you look at a golfer, and the moment that you make an adjustment to the way that you hit a ball, whether or not it's more efficient, you usually hit the ball less far or less direct as what you would before you tried to make the adjustment, until it becomes more of a natural part of your game. And so, for anyone out there who is second guessing the benefits of that, I'd really encourage you to consider it, because, man, I mean, especially coming from a bloke like you, it's adds fuel to the fire of the frustration I feel around this part of running.
It's a weird. I always think it's a weird thing too that me and you have so many similar experiences being on other sides of the world. So, like, I think a lot of times they get like, oh, that's an American runners do X, Australian runners do Y. They're both doing X. They're doing the same thing, which is a really weird thing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is, man. It really is. Dude, I got to get over there at some stage. Not only to go for a run with you, but I got to come and check out these rooms that you're doing, and come and do a couple of comedy spots with you. It'd be so nice to meet you in the flesh, brother.
Hey, man, you are always welcome. I think that'd be one of the best days ever. Go for a run in the morning, do a comedy show at night. Yeah, man, I think this has really been special. I'm thankful every time you have me on the show, and man, hopefully we keep doing good things, inspiring people to do good things, and getting great information out there.
Yeah, thank you, brother. We'll do it again soon, man. I won't leave it 2 years this next time. I don't know where that time got to. It trips me out that it was so long.
Yeah, man, time flies. Real quick, one more information. It's Finish Strong, resistance training for endurance athletes. Myself, Dr. Richard Borgers. Our Instagram is finish_strong_book. And then my Instagram is Mr. Fifth Round, MR, the number 5, THROUND. Thank you very much, man.
And I'll make sure I've got all that linked in the show notes to this episode. So if you're interested, jump over there. But for now, ladies and gents, we'll see you all next week.